In this tutorial, I'll show you how to read a scholarly article to use for a general research paper. We'll start here from the results page in EBSCO, and I'm just going to click on one of the articles that came up in my search. Now let's take a look at the different parts of the article. You'll notice that up here at the top is the publication information for the article. You can tell it comes from the Journal of Health Communication, and it was published in 2013, and the copyright, along with some other useful information. Here's the title of the article, the author, along with the author's credentials, and then you'll see here in italics an abstract of the content of the article. Notice that the abstract of the article gives a summary of the entire article. It's not just a preview. It actually lets you know essentially what the authors did and what they found. Often you can tell whether or not you're going to be able to use an article for your research just by what's included in the abstract. Next, the article starts out with an introduction. Sometimes you'll actually see this introduction labeled, or sometimes the writing just begins. The introduction is one of the most useful parts of the article for new researchers because it gives you context for what the authors are writing about. In other words, it gives you background information and lets you know why the authors think that their topic is important. Often it summarizes work that's been done in the past. So you can see that in this article, the authors talk about, they get started by saying that children and adolescents are bombarded with unrealistic portrayals of alcohol in the media that glamorize depictions of alcohol use. So that lets you know that they're interested in how children view depictions of alcohol use. And they make a claim here also that they believe that educating children about media influence should start as early as possible. As we scroll along, we'll see that they move further into talking about what they think is important, and then they have a literature review. A literature review is a summary of the articles that they have read that already have been written on the topic that they're writing about. So the researchers went out and researched the topic, and they're summarizing the information that they found. So you can see that each of these italicized sections under the literature review heading summarize information that the authors found themselves. Some of this information could be useful to you as a new researcher. Sometimes it's more detail than you'll need. After the literature review, we'll see that the authors came up with their own hypothesis and research question. Sometimes this is included in the introduction. This is when the authors decide what they want to study, what they're going to look at through their study. And the next section is the methods section. You don't need to spend a great deal of time reading the methods section unless you've been asked to critique the methods to evaluate whether or not they were good. As a beginning researcher, you might be interested in knowing what the researchers did, but often they summarize this material in the abstract or the introduction. So you can glance through the methods, but you don't need to spend a great deal of time working on it. In the methods, the authors say step by step what they do when they conduct their study. So they let you know who the participants are, what steps they took, what kind of experiment or what kind of study they did, step by step. Next, in a scholarly article comes the results section. The results section is simply a listing of all the data that the researchers gathered. There is no interpretation in this section, and usually new researchers can skip through this material. Usually there's a lot of statistical information that's pretty advanced. usually at a deeper level of understanding than at the beginning level that researchers, like new college writers, need. You'll notice there are sometimes charts and tables that include data, but often this is not data that you have the skills to evaluate. Probably the most useful section of a scholarly article for new researchers, in addition to the introduction, is the discussion. The discussion is where the authors of the study discuss what they feel was important about their findings. They discuss their own research and what they feel they found or figured out, or why what they figured out is relevant, and ways in which they think that what they've learned should be used in the future. They also often discuss their own limitations, problems they found, other things that they think need to be investigated, maybe in other or further studies. Finally, the paper ends with references. These references are useful if you want to follow the researcher's trail to find more articles, but generally, they're not something that you need to spend a great deal of time on as a new researcher. So, once again, as a new researcher, a beginning researcher in college, you're going to want to read the abstract that comes at the beginning of the article and lets you know what the whole article is about. You're going to want to read the introduction to get some context and background information to help you understand what the researchers are talking about in their study. And you're going to want to skip down and make sure that you thoroughly read the discussion, because the discussion is where the researchers discuss the importance of their findings and also any problems they feel they found during their study or problems with their study. And that's a sort of quick and easy way to get through some of these lengthy articles that might be useful to you, but are often sort of a new kind of reading for new researchers in college to encounter. And I hope this tutorial helps.